report that we wrote on your desk. And it talks about not just retail, but retail technology trends very broadly as we see them. We originally wrote it after the Consumer Electronics Show that we attended in January of 2016, and we recently updated it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey from Wall Street to Main Street. I spent 17 years on Wall Street, and I started off actually as a global strategist at Morgan Stanley. I worked with the pundits from Byron Biggs to Byron Wien, and then on to Bear Stearns, and spent the last 12 years of my career at Citigroup. So let's get started. So Wall Street's really changed in terms of the landscape. And I still remember when I first started my training, basically multiples didn't matter. It was the go-go days of 1997, and we were paid on banking deals, and it really hadn't yet been regulated. So as you can see from this timeline, things really changed. A lot of disruption. A lot of disruption like all of us right now are facing in this room. So we had to really rethink our business. How did we get paid? How did we do our jobs? How did we add value? And what we saw is that we didn't have talent come to us like we had previously. So I went to the University of Chicago, and I didn't graduate in 2010, but this was the most recent data I could find, and actually showed you in a very short period of time, from 2010 to 2015, what happened to talent. So in a 5-year time span, we saw almost 1,000 basis points shift away from jobs in the financial services industry. And what happened is many of those jobs actually went into technology. The disruptors, people who are disrupting our industry now. So a real change. We had the global financial crisis. And that actually ties into the story of my own journey in terms of how I ended up on this stage. So many of us can relate to these pictures. Many of us, myself included, were actually in Filene's when they used to do everything by hand. So my family is from the Boston area, and I still remember going into the store in very tight clothing so I could try all the clothes on over, right? Many of you, I'm sure, were there with me. And right, you'd all look. I was usually looking for the clothing that was 75% off after the 24 selling days. But right, there was excitement. There was retail-tainment. It was experiential retailing at its best. So I then met in 2001 a gentleman by the name of Scott Friend, who has honestly probably touched all of us somehow. And he talked about this idea, at the time it was heresy, of the science of markdown management, markdown optimization. And I listened and I was like, I remember Filene's. If you could take Filene's and put it into optimization, and remember, I'm a University of Chicago graduate, and I was like, okay, math, numbers, technology, and you can improve retailers' bottom lines, I'm in. So actually, I really kind of got all the Citigroup troops behind me. We took Scott on the road, spent a lot of time introducing him to investors, and in 2005, Scott's company, ProfitLogic, was actually sold to Oracle. Citigroup had been such a big supporter, I was actually invited to join Oracle's Retail Strategy Council, and was actually really launched into the world of retail technology. And I'll tell you, what I started to see change was how business was done every day, the science, the data analytics, all the data that was available that we weren't using yet, but the potential, space optimization, optimization in terms of point of sale. And we started to see some companies really buying into this, but not necessarily learning how to use it just yet. So I ended up, unfortunately, because of a personal crisis, my mother became very ill. I left Citigroup in 2013 to join a company called Profitect. I became their chief customer officer. And we did big data and predictive analytics. And I also started to get into this idea of the intersection of retail, tech, and fashion. What did it mean? How did it work? I also worked with a company called Tradestone and Ruben Singer, who's a high-end fashion designer, because at Citi, in the world of Wall Street, you're not able to service anyone besides your bank. But I started to serve on advisory boards. I got involved with accelerators. and I loved it, and I saw what it could really mean. Then, in April of 2014, Spencer Fung, who's now the CEO of Li & Fung, approached me about this idea of taking my prior work at Wall Street, this idea of research, and how could we start to spread kind of the good word of retail technology to the masses, and what I'd done at Profitect, and put it all together into a retail think tank, but make it available to anyone and everyone. Nobody would have to pay for it. So now we publish something, it's a daily feed, but we also on our website, we literally have over 1,000 pieces of research. Some are very in-depth, some are very light, but this idea of, you can read anything from AI to virtual reality to deep pieces on certain retailers. And so today I'm here to present what we look at as the most important retail trends. There's 25 of them. So we speak globally on retail trends, retail tech trends. We go deep, we go broad. I spent a lot of my time in China as well. I certainly wouldn't put myself up as a China expert. We have those in our company as well. But that's where I've spent a lot of my time over the past 2 years. So we'll kick things off. I'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A. And thanks so much for having me here today. I'm very honored, and thank you, Terry. So what we've seen has been, with store traffic down, in-store experience is very key. So for the last 37 months, store traffic has continued to be challenging. What we've seen is the high-end malls are the ones who have been the least affected. And that definitely says something. They have invested in the experience. They have started to work with beacons. They're starting to change the experience and the relationship with the customer, right? They're investing in mobile. They're investing in doing more with their retailers. They're really thinking more about co-location. So we're starting to see a change in the experience. We're not necessarily seeing traffic in the kind of plus category like we used to, but we're at least seeing it in the kind of up 1% to 2% category. And actually, just to go back here, we're actually spending a lot of time with the mall owners here, the REITs, General Growth, Simon, and Talman, in terms of thinking new, out of the box. And we're trying to connect in with them, different tech companies, and also speaking to them more frequently. So I don't know if you're aware, but Plug and Play, who's the largest accelerator in the world, Simon actually has a contest to bring in new technologies, a $25,000 contest. Who is the best new technology, and to start bringing them into the Simon property malls. So we are seeing a lot of new things happen. So what we've seen here, and actually Urban Outfitters is a block from my office, so I will tell you I'm in there often to buy food for lunch and coffee. So they've started to do a lot in terms of driving traffic. And this is what we're seeing. Anything that you can do in terms of experiential retail to drive traffic into your stores, we think is critical. In-store technology, we'll have a video in a minute. I'm sure many of you, if you haven't seen it physically, you've seen it virtually, is what Rebecca Minkoff is doing. And we think that it's great. In your books that are on your desk or in your chairs, Tommy Hilfiger has really done a lot. And once again, we're focusing very much in terms of apparel retail here. They've done a lot in terms of virtual reality. We're also seeing it at the high end as well, but we think this is a great way. How else do you bring what's happening on the runway into your stores? VR is a great way to do that. So customization, personalization, localization, these are 3 words that are incredibly important to us. But what we're seeing is, in many of these cases, you can actually customize your product in-store, have it delivered to your home. Nike and many of the others are doing a great job of this. So let me roll the video.
Hi, my name's Healy Cipher, and I'm with the eBay Inc. Retail Innovation Team. And I'm here at the beautiful flagship Rebecca Minkoff store in New York City. We've partnered together to create the Connected Store, a highly digital and seamlessly connected experience that brings the best of the online world into the physical. Together, we're going to change the future of retail. As a shopper begins to browse, she'll find the Rebecca Minkoff store is a physical manifestation of all of the best parts of the online experience. The Connected Wall, a beautiful large mirrored display, shows the latest Rebecca Minkoff brand content, runway shows, photos, and anything happening on the social channels. By pressing the mirror, she initiates an interactive experience where she can browse the latest looks, find products she likes, even request a fitting room. She can order drinks and download the mobile app directly from the mirror. And by pressing Send to My Room, our shopper can initiate a one-on-one stylist session. When the room's ready, she'll get a text message. Upon entering the fitting room, the shopper will find the product she requested, in addition to suggestions from the stylist. Adjustable lighting in the fitting room also allows the shopper to change and control her environment. The fitting room uses RFID to magically recognize each item in the room. If the shopper needs a different size, cut, or color, she can easily request it from the stylist by simply touching the glass of the mirror. The shopper also has the option to attach everything she's tried on in the fitting room to her personal profile. In the future, this will allow her to access what she's tried on, what she's bought, and to receive intelligent recommendations. When the shopper is finished with a fitting room session, she has the option to send her selected items directly into checkout. Once the stylist confirms the items she'd like to purchase, she'll instantly receive a digital receipt. Together, Rebecca Minkoff and the eBay Inc. Retail Innovation team are bringing new digital technology into the retail experience, helping the customer connect with the store in a way they've never experienced before.
So that's just one example of what we're starting to see in experiential retail. So smart malls, this idea of how do we reshape the physical shopping experience. So in a study that was done, only 25% of consumers could remember the last 4 stores in the order that they were visited in malls. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that beacons are very important in terms of tracking physical location and the order in which you visited. And why this is important, as I mentioned earlier, is this idea of co-location. So if you can make it easier and a better use of the consumer's time to visit, it's very critical. I'm actually working on a study right now with the International Council of Shopping Centers in terms of bringing more food and beverage into the mall, but the right food and beverage. And if you look actually in Asia, specifically in China, between 30 to 40% of their space is allocated to food and beverage. In the US, it's between 10 and 12%. So if the consumer thinks to go to P.F. Chang's and then potentially go shopping, right, it could actually not only drive traffic, but also maybe if they have, let's say, a 30 to 45-minute wait, maybe they use that time to go shopping. And so if we start to think differently about how the consumer uses the mall, maybe we start to put in clinics so that they can take care of a medical need. Maybe they get their nails done. But there's definitely an opportunity to rethink how the mall is utilized. And a lot of these startups that I'm spending time with, there's a big focus for them on the mall. And some of the companies that I'm spending time with, Westfield Labs has done an amazing job. Macerich and also Retail Next is one of the companies that's doing a very active engagement in terms of tracking consumer behavior. So this is one of the things I would say I focus on a lot is I fear that retailers are being too aggressive in terms of store closings. Let me share with you why. I think that, well, number one, the first bullet here is that there's been a 7% year-over-year increase in store closures. And I think that as everyone looks at what they're closing, I think that they are too aggressive and too concerned about what's happening online in some cases. I think there's an opportunity, like I said, to improve in-store experience. I think you can use your stores for click and collect. I don't think that it's all dire. I tend to be a retail optimist. And I think in many cases, you can utilize technology to change that experience. Right? What we're seeing in the data is that millennials like to go into the store. I know, this is shocking. But they do want to make sure that it's a good use of their time. And if you can utilize this idea of click and collect, if you can make their in-store behavior, if they can think about the store differently, that's, I think, the opportunity. And so what we see here is that Dollar General, in the next 2 years, will open 2,000 stores. That's a shocking number. And you look at who's opening stores, it is unbelievable. And when you think about Aldi and Lidl coming into the US in aggressive form, and we're thinking about more athleisure, I mean, Under Armour, Dick's Sporting Goods, some of these fast fashion guys, or as one of the people on my team likes to call them, the international invaders, we're seeing a change in terms of who is blanketing the US. But the positive news is that we are seeing an increase in terms of square footage by some, not by others. And I do want to say, as a word of caution, I think that people are getting too aggressive too quickly in terms of some of these store closures. So this is one of my, if you will, big ideas. And number one, the estimates that we have is that Amazon will be about 14% of retail by the end of the year 2016. It's a big number. But I think that more importantly, this idea, and I think Tesco has, we're global, so we like to think global. But I think Tesco's done a great job with this, is that the idea of owning the pipe into the house, and I think grocery has the opportunity to do this. So the average consumer goes to the grocery store 2.1 times a week. They spend 45 minutes there. That's a lot of time. So if you can get this pipe into the house, through online, there's this huge opportunity to get other things through that pipe: cars, sofas, right, apparel, beauty, et cetera. But I think as Terry talked about with Backstage, right, they're buying pasta. So who's to say that Macy's isn't the pipe to the house and you've got other things? It doesn't have to be your traditional Tesco. There's a significant opportunity here to think outside the proverbial box. So like I said, I'm a retail optimist. I want to think differently. And I think loyalty plays into this, which I'll talk about later as well. So if the consumer is thinking more about loyalty, right, there's an opportunity here to grow. And what we're seeing here, as I mentioned, is discounters, this fourth bullet here. The average discounter basket size in the UK is up 47% in 5 years, which is suggesting growing consumer trust. So as we move to Omni, we're seeing an increase, the second bullet here, this 75% correlation between CapEx to sales and e-commerce to sales. We're seeing an increase in terms of tech spend as it relates to e-commerce, but also just tech in general. And as retailers have not necessarily been opening stores at the same pace that they were, I think the right move has been to move that tech spend into e-commerce, supply chain. And so what we're seeing is that it's not hopeless. And as one of the people I work with closely said, sometimes there's a late mover advantage. So we're seeing leapfrogging in some cases. So what we're seeing here, I think, are some very interesting kind of ideas: the seamless experience, same-day delivery, and click and collect. I think click and collect is huge. I think it drives traffic. It saves the consumer dollars that they would normally spend in terms of shipping and handling. I think Walmart has done a great job of advertising this. Right, many of their stores, you see trailers behind the store because they have so much volume, especially around the holidays, that they're doing around click and collect. But I've talked to other retailers, and those who had actually thought about doing a traditional e-commerce strategy where they were delivering to the consumer, they instead bypassed that and decided to do traditional click and collect into the stores. The feeling was also that they would have other sales, cross sales of other merchandise. So we own a brand in Hong Kong called Circle K. It's a convenience store format. And we actually, in order to provide authenticity, if you will, of the products that are sold, we do click and collect into our stores. And we actually see a fairly decent cross-fertilization of sales. So this, I think, just going back to the idea of building out physical stores, we're seeing something I think is very interesting: the idea of the evolving pure play. So these were all companies that started off in the virtual world. They're all now coming into the physical world. Why is that? Well, number one, I think millennials want a physical place to go. Number two, I do think that the store is where it's at. The consumer wants to see, touch, taste, feel, and I think it's very important. So Bonomos is a great example. Blue Nile, right? I mean, this was one I remember, right? It was all going to be virtual all the time, and we're starting to see these. Rent the Runway, I think, Warby Parker. I mean, the list goes on. And so, and Birchbox, which I'll talk more about subscription later, but right, subscription to physical, that to me is one of the best examples. But I think there's something to really think about here. And when I talk to the mall REITs, one of the things that some of these CEOs who are, to me, on the cutting edge, where they've been most aggressive, they looked at Amazon in terms of the stores that were purely virtual, and they got very aggressive. And what they did is they courted a lot of these to talk to them about becoming physical. So this is just an idea of some of the, and Gilt obviously has gone through a bit of a transformation, now being with Hudson's Bay. And that's a very, right, you can return your Gilt purchases into Saks. I mean, it's all, right, I mean, in some ways, it's all becoming one big happy family. And who knows where it'll be even in 12 months' time. So we actually, at Lee & Fung, are doing more and more with Amazon, right? You've got Amazon now doing more on the private label side. And it's very interesting in terms of how they work. They just want great product. They want to offer great product at a great price to their consumers. It's a great business model. And if you look at this first bullet, this is something that everyone in this room should think about. So basically half, right? Maybe more than half if you want to think about it that way. 51 cents of every dollar of growth in US e-commerce was Amazon last year. I would have to argue it'll probably be more this year. And if you look at the second bullet, I don't know if that's more or less scary, but at least it's positive. And the company generated 24% of total US retail growth. And then the third one is where we get, I start to get more involved in, is what's happening on the apparel side. And I will tell you, when I was a retail analyst, I remember they were talking about going into fashion, and I was like, who's going to buy fashion on Amazon? Well, it's happening, and it's happening much larger, I think, than any of us had ever thought. And so if you're a retailer, how you think about playing with Amazon is definitely something that you have to consider. So as we look here, and we put many retailers on this page, the growth in apparel has definitely changed over time. And when you think about who's winning and who's losing, there can be many different, right? Everyone always talks about the weather. We work very closely with Planalytics, who I saw Fred Fox running around earlier, and I want to thank him. But the weather does matter, and we have a very large sweaters business, so I hear about the weather all the time, and about how warm it was over the holidays, because you're not going to sell sweaters when it's literally this holiday season was the warmest in the past 7 years. But you have to think about, so what do you start to do? Do you add a wearable component to your clothing? Do you 3D print things in your stores? What do you start to do to drive traffic and to drive purchases in apparel? You start to think outside the box. And I think that's what Macy's is doing, right? They're thinking differently. So I'm a big believer in loyalty. I think that the Boots card, I remember from, I used to cover Boots back when it was a public company, and obviously it's gone through many iterations. But when I'm with my friends in the UK, they want to make sure that they've got their Boots card so they can use it at the airport. That's how loyal they are to that Boots card. And Walgreens, to me, had one of the most amazing, successful rollouts of any loyalty program I've ever seen. So I know that we heard that they still have a long ways to go, but I think that they've done an amazing job in a very short period of time. But I think it's just a great example. And once again, this whole idea of this kind of late mover advantage. So last generation loyalty, this idea of coupons. I think we're beyond, right, we now have digital coupons. And today's loyalty, this idea of using gamification, and I think tomorrow's loyalty is smartphone-based, and it's not to say that that's not gamification as well. But we have a huge opportunity to get consumers, and that's why this idea of planning, this idea almost of kind of loyalty consortiums. But there's a huge opportunity here. We have to make it fun for the consumer to shop. So, to get them as opposed to spending their dollars in restaurants and on vacations, et cetera, or while they're on vacation to shop. But this is where I think we have a huge amount of opportunity. So, we all spend time on social media. And the average adult spent 109 minutes per day in 2015. That's a lot of time. So, well, we're all at work, right? And so these are some numbers I think that are very interesting. So, and I just pulled these, literally yesterday. So these are very current numbers. But Snapchat is still the lowest on this page. But I spent a lot of time in Asia, specifically China. So 650 million users on WeChat. WhatsApp is 1 billion users. So these are big. And it's important for everyone in this room to think about how do you use social media to reach your consumer. The buy buttons, right, we're still very early with all that. But how does your marketing team use this? And I do think that Snapchat, so while the number of users is low, the views are high. And I think that it's very important, and you think, right, the ages of people that you're reaching. But, it's very heavily female, and it's very funny. So I got our CEO on Snapchat, And I said to him, I said at one point, stop sending me pictures. You know? But it's great in terms of this ability. And I don't know, the next video I'm going to show you, I would assume most of you are not aware of, but it's something to really think about in terms of business opportunity. And this is just, so once again, this is an opportunity, right? In terms of, and Rachel had talked about this, Burberry, Chevrolet, there's many retailers who are starting to brand heavily now on Snapchat. So mobile payments. So I use, and I'll talk about this in an upcoming slide, I started to do much more on mobile payments because this idea that, and it's one of the trends that we point out in the book, that you don't need cash anymore, right? You can just leave the house with your mobile phone and you're all set. But I think that even in Asia, they've been shocked at the adoption of Samsung Pay. So you'll see here that, yeah, over 30 million has been, I think, much higher than anyone would have expected. And why? Why? Loyalty. It all kind of comes back. So is anyone, well, can I see a show of hands for anyone here who's on WeChat? OK, we've got people here. All right. So when I'm having a bad day, and yes, I do have them, somebody will send me a red packet. So what's a red packet? It's money on WeChat. And I can use it to pay for things. I can go out to eat. I can use it to pay my electric bills. I can use it to pay for my cabs. And it's just, and literally someone will WeChat me and they'll say, you have a red packet from Xiaoming or from Jing or somebody. And I got to tell you, it's amazing how that does uplift your spirits. And so what we're seeing is that there were 32.1 billion red envelopes, red packets. And so this is definitely what we're seeing. 74% of all WeChat users use a red packet. And so what I'm about to show you is how things are changing even here in the US. So my friend Snapchat.
This is perfect for Mom.
Yes.
It's $30. I'll get it. Will you send me 15?
Yeah, totally.
Snapchat has Snap Cash. Just use your cash tags. Send money easy. It's oh so breezy. Snap Cash with Snapchat. Chat your cash amount straight from your bank account. Send money easy. It's fast and breezy. Snap Cash. And you'll be feeling fine. Put in your debit card to get Snap Cash online.
You can connect your card and it will be stored securely for future transactions. A wise investment at any age.
Here's a new feature we're rolling out. So excited.
So we probably don't need to see all of that, but this idea, so what's happening in Asia, we're starting to see come here. And so this idea that we can start to now pay for things with Snapchat Cash, we're starting to see things move very quickly here in the US as well. And so I just want to make you aware of some of the things that we're seeing also. So this idea also of influencers, I'm sure many of you use them. I was actually out with the CEO of Target, Brian Cornell, and he had some of his influencers with him. And I thought that was fabulous. So one of them was on the plus side of their business, and which they're looking to grow aggressively. And we actually just saw JCPenney rolled out a new plus size business. And I actually personally think it's an opportunity. But the fact that people are now traveling with their influencers or their bloggers, I think is definitely an interesting trend. So what we're seeing is, the stats that I was able to pull, that 81% of marketers found influencer marketing effective in 2015, and 59% of marketers are planning to increase this budget in 2016. So Target I used because I find that they're one of the ones that are the most aggressive, and then I'm going to show a video for one of the ones that we work with. So I found MuseFind through one of the accelerators that I work with. And we have actually been asked to help a lot of retailers find influencer marketing platforms because this is an extremely inexpensive way to advertise. So I would say that, and Whitley is another one that we found. I found them through an Israeli accelerator called Icon. But I would tell you that this is one of the things that we've been asked by many retailers to spend more time working on. So social shopping, the idea of sharing. How do you share what you love? So this is an example from WeChat. They're a real pioneer in social shopping. But as we see, WeChat comes to the US pretty quickly. But this idea of how do you start to share what you love? You know, we see it on Facebook as well. I see it less frequently there probably than I do in the WeChat platform. But friends of mine will share with me something that they bought and they loved. And then, you know, invariably about 50% of the time, I at least look at it and potentially buy it. So one thing that was very interesting is that Americans tend to need about 2 photos of something to purchase it. And in China, people need 8 photos of something. And for any of those who work in the marketing space, you know the cost of these photos. And so it's significantly more expensive as you're moving into China. So Nice is actually a company that will help you with your photos in China, but they're saying that the product detail that's needed. So this is something to also think about as you're seeing Chinese consumers, tourists, come into the US, because the photos and the way that they need brands described, even as they're in your stores, is completely different than other consumers. And so this is, I love timelines, and I found that we had a lot of them today. But what we've seen in 2015, the idea of the buy button was the year of the buy button. And so we're still not necessarily seeing, you know, a significant uptake, but I would tell you that it's still very early, but I think that we have a huge opportunity. I'm going to tell you, I want to take the buy button to the physical store. So what I want and what I dream of, and I've spoken to many CEOs about this, is I want to go to the store, because I still like physical retail, and I see a mannequin. They're doing this now on catwalks, right? And I want to have my size profile loaded into an app, and I want to be able to scan something in the store and just say, buy it. And then I want it delivered to my house. It can take a week. I'm okay. You know, I don't need it there tomorrow, although tomorrow would be nice. But I think that there's this idea of thinking about how a buy button is used and taking it into the physical store. So this idea of this seamless, if we want to call it Omni, if we want to call it hybrid retail, which I prefer that kind of nomenclature. But I think that 2016 will be a bit of an inflection year in terms of how we think about taking online to offline. So Rachel talked about this, and I think I'm going to roll a Poshmark video because the amount of volume now being done here is significant.
Women in America put over $1 trillion worth of stuff in their closets every 3 years. A lot of it just sits there. What we wanted to do was to make it super simple for women to be able to realize the value of the treasures that sit in their closet and do it from the convenience of your iPhone or your mobile device. Poshmark is a mobile marketplace for fashion. It allows women to buy and sell fashion straight from their closets. Women are uploading more than $1 million of inventory every day.
So when you are about to list something on Poshmark, you take 4 photos, you upload them, you write down exactly what it is, and then underneath that you describe exactly what you are selling, and it'll actually tell you how much you'll get after the 20% is taken. Since I started selling last year in April, I've sold 250 items. Poshmark has improved my life by a lot. I don't feel as nervous about buying something because I know that I can wear it a few times and then I can list it. And once it's out of my closet, I can replace it with something else. And so for me, I get to now have a revolving closet. This is my Louis Vuitton FB leather bag. I bought this on Poshmark. If I bought it in store, it's gonna cost me way more.
As soon as you make a sale, we email you a shipping label, and you can use that shipping label with any box you have and ship the item out. So in the end, the experience becomes very, very simple as a seller and very, very simple as a buyer.
The Poshmark community for me has been very special because this app allows me to build friendships, not just selling clothes. What I love is that Poshmark also offers these virtual parties that are listed by categories.
Posh parties are themed events that happen within the Poshmark app, where women across the country can buy and sell at the same time together.
My phone will notify me when there's like a party starting and I just sign into it. So if it's by jewelry, accessories, spring, nighttime, work chic.
We are seeing women not only buy and sell, but connect at a personal level. Many women come and tell us that Poshmark has changed their lives. Poshmark is a place where women can really celebrate fashion as it happens and also make some money along the way.
And so these guys are doing $1 million a day. So that's $365 million a year, probably even more this year. So this is a lot of money, right, that's being taken out of traditional retail. So, and it's only growing. All right, I've been told I have 5 minutes, so I have 9 more trends, so we're going to talk very quickly. So this is one of my favorite, the subscription economy, because I think of it as a gift to myself every month, or a gift to my dog, or a gift to somebody else. And I find that they can curate much better than I ever could. So I very much encourage a lot of retailers to get involved in the subscription market. So once you can find out what your consumers like, you can start to, so whether it's a certain brand or whether it's footwear, but I think there's a significant opportunity here. So I use Birchbox, I use BarkBox, and what I find is that they can curate for my dogs, I have 2 of them, much better than I ever could. And with Birchbox, and do you know why? They ask me 300 questions. Imagine if as a retailer, you could ask your customers 300 questions. Imagine what a phenomenal job you could do serving your customer. So sharing economy, I feel that we've covered this very well. And with the rental economy, I think that what you're seeing is that the consumer wants to rent, not own. This, I think, is very important, and I think Walgreens did an amazing job of covering this, but I think that the consumer wants to know, and I think Reformation here, for those of you who've shopped them, I will tell you 50% of the time I go on the site and what I want to buy has already been sold through. So what Reformation does is that they use, if you see this bullet, they use basically source sustainable fabrics and vintage garments. And so what we're seeing is that there's new retailers who are popping up all the time who are taking money out of the proverbial retail pie. And so staying on top of all these and figuring out how you can partner with them, I think is very critical. And I want to show this, and then I'm going to run off the stage.
The world is getting older. How much older? By 2050, the number of people over 65 will triple. A new aging attitude survey of 21 countries by the Pew Research Center found that Japan is the most worried about aging. 87% of people think it's a problem. That's in contrast to the US, where only 26% of people are concerned. The survey found that the older the population is predicted to be, the more they're worried about aging. Countries also have different takes on who should care for the old. Only a few have a big chunk of people who think seniors should care for themselves. Overall, most people think the government should be responsible. But also look at a place like Pakistan, where 77% of folks think it's up to families. All this aging can hurt economies. Spain's a good example. In the future, there will be more people, younger and older, relying on those of working age. The US, however, may have an advantage here. Its population is growing slower and getting older, but it's still projected to be younger than major trading partners in Europe and Asia. That's because America has the most immigrants of any country. They're bringing higher fertility rates, even as US-born women are having less babies. Between 1960 and 2005, immigrants and their descendants accounted for 51% of US population growth. Now, between 2005 and 2050, they'll account for 82% of that growth. Pew says countries with the biggest chances of economic boosts may be those with the youngest populations. Among these, Nigeria is well placed. By 2050, it's projected to have a bigger population than the United States. David Botti, BBC News.
So one of the things we're actually spending a lot of time on is the silver economy. And that backs into what Richard was talking about with Walgreens. So with that, I'm going to conclude because I know we're out of time. My slides will be available, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today.